From the TV30 studio, here's Jim Schneider.
Well, good evening and welcome to inFocus. We're so glad you've joined us as we have a number of issues to talk about tonight. It's our monthly legislative update, and we'll get to that here momentarily. First of all, I would just like to mention that this past Saturday, the United States joined forces with Israel and got engaged with a military operation known as Operation Epic Fury. The target was regime change in Iran, and we have seen the Ayatollah who has been taken out in this. 40 plus top leaders also have been taken out by this, and the president announced that we have sunk multiple ships. There's been aircraft combat that has taken place as well, and we know it's been a very laborsome weekend of military operations taking place. And I just wanted to, we will be talking more about this here in the days to come, but I would like to just play one brief clip from a press conference that was held this morning with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, in which he was asked at the very end of the press conference about prayer for our troops and this operation here. And let's go to that videotape.
Thank you, sir. As you've said, there are a large amount of U.S. service members that are in harm's way right now. What is your prayer for them?
First of all, my prayer for them is that I do pray for them. My wife prays for them. Our family prays for them. Our cabinet prays for them. None of this is done on a whim. Having been in their boots, having been in their shoes, having been in their flight suits, I know we think about them with every decision that we make and every recommendation that we make to the President of the United States. Those recommendations are made prayerfully. And when I pray every day for them and for this mission, I pray simply for the biblical wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it. It's going to take courage to follow through on this. There's going to be a lot of noise, and we pray for that, and we hope all of you do as well. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Biblical wisdom to know what is right and then having the courage to do that. And certainly we encourage your prayers for the Secretary of War, for the Commander-in-Chief, as well as our armed forces, the military commanders on the field, CENTCOM and so forth, and soldiers, men and women that are part of the combat operations. Please keep this in your prayer. Very, very important as to what is going on in the Middle East at this particular time. We have lost some service members, and certainly our hearts go out to these military families. As President Trump even gave tribute to them as they have given their lives for the sake of freedom here in the days to come. Tonight is our monthly legislative update, and with us in our studios tonight, we do welcome back Daniel Degner, who is president of Wisconsin Family Council. Daniel, good to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here, Jim.
And also Sam Krebs, the legislative director for Wisconsin Family Action. Sam, good evening.
Evening, Jim.
Great, good to have you both here. We've got a lot of heavy things we're going to be talking about tonight, but I wanted to start with something that we want to honor. You've been honoring marriage in Wisconsin Family Council, and you just recognized Wisconsin's longest married couple, some 76 years.
Yeah, this couple, it was just super remarkable to be able to see and hear the story of Dewey and Faye Bartell, and just about what God has done in their marriage of 76 years. We're so grateful and thankful for how God is working through couples like them, but also there's 21 other couples that have been married for 60 years or more. And if you know of any couples, if you are a couple that is that 60-year or more mark next year, we love to have them apply, and they can do so at WIFamilyCouncil.org in the month of February. But again, marriage is such a cornerstone, the family is such a cornerstone in our state, and every opportunity we have to promote it and share God's blessings of it is a win for Wisconsin.
Great, and certainly, wow, 76 years, absolutely amazing for that many years of wedded bliss, and we congratulate this couple. And something special that Wisconsin Family Council does. Something else special coming up for Wisconsin Family Council on the first Friday of May.
Yeah, on Friday, May 1st, we'll be having our 40th anniversary gala. And so many of these viewers, I'm sure you remember when Marv Munyon and a few others started the organization back in 1986. And praise God, we're now at that 40-year mark. And so we're going to look at our past, we're going to honor our past, but also embrace the future we have going forward and honor Jelaine Appling's 27 years of leadership and her legacy. And that'll be Friday, May 1st from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Ingleside Hotel in Pewaukee. Tickets are going fast, so please go to wifamilycouncil.org to purchase them or call us toll-free at 888-378-7395.
Great, and you'll see more information there on the website, and that coming up on May the 1st. So something that those of you who have been following Wisconsin Family Council started back many, many years ago, and the Christian Research Institute was part of the early names for it, and we have seen the transitions take place there, but the focus has always been the same.
Jim, I want to jump in too and just put in a word for that. I'm really excited for the gala because of the speaker that's been going there. We're going to have a guest speaker named Katie Faust. She's gaining a lot of popularity in conservative circles nationally, but she's a very dynamic speaker, very passionate about the rights of children, especially in respect to how society treats children in both the marriage and in life situations. So really invite people to come and hear Katie speak, because I think it's going to be really, really fantastic time.
Okay, very good. Hitting another issue, just a week ago here was the State of the Union address, President Donald Trump. We don't have time for the whole address, don't have time for excerpts of that tonight, but there was one part of that speech that really stood up to many across the nation, and Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson hit the nail on the head when he pointed that out on a recent Fox program. Here's what he had to say.
Joining me now is Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, great to have you. Good to see you. Thanks for coming into the studio as well. Also with us for the entire show this morning is former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Your reaction to the speech last night?
I thought it was an excellent speech. I was not expecting to enjoy an hour, 45-minute speech as much as I did. I really thought the crowning moment really was when President Trump just asked Democrats, would you reaffirm that the first duty of American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens? And I could not believe Democrats didn't stand for that. I couldn't believe they wouldn't stand for celebrating the fact that a young child injured grievously by an illegal immigrant driving an 18-wheeler was healing, was in the audience. Wouldn't stand when we celebrated the life of a Ukrainian young woman who was brutally murdered. They just sat on their hands like a bunch of sourpusses. So again, I thought President Trump showed really how craven the Democrat ideology and policies are. And again, it was a very hopeful speech. It was a celebration of America and American heroes, and it was fun. It was really fun to be in the chamber last night.
It did seem odd. I don't know if you gentlemen had opportunity to see the speech, but to see the president asking people to stand up if we need to put the American people first over illegal aliens, and it was just right down that aisle where some stood and some did not.
Yeah, and it even reminded me too of what you opened tonight's program with about Pete Hegseth praying for those that are in our military. And elections really truly have consequences. We had one candidate, one person who ran for president who was very clear of thought prayer was a joke, thought prayer was something that was not serious, but also was very pro illegal immigration. And on the other hand, we had a candidate who said prayer is going to be an important part of their cabinet, important part of leading the country, but as well as American citizens are going to be put first. And we did see that come to fruition even just this last week with the State of the Union, as well as Pete Hegseth's reaction.
State of the State speech. Governor Evers giving this, calling it the Year of the Neighbor.
Well, Jim, I'll count them both on the State of the State and the State of the Union. And I have to admit that I didn't watch either, because the speeches have really become performative art. And I'll contrast maybe the two of them. Donald Trump, President Trump, is the master of telling stories, especially on that grand scale of the State of the Union. Bringing in the hockey team. I'm a sports fan. I was watching that gold medal match on Sunday morning before heading to church. And so it is really a contrast between Governor Evers' speech, which was very dry, very boring, very unemotional even, to bring up the people who maybe this policy has touched. And I think that's just to show that I think maybe the governor's checked out a little bit potentially, but the governor has declared 2026 the Year of the Neighbor. I don't really sure what that means, because last year was the Year of the Kid, and governor took every opportunity to block or do things that were anti-kid. And so I would expect potentially the governor to do things that are anti-neighbor in the Year of the Neighbor.
Yeah. Daniel? That was perhaps, his last Day of the State speech.
Yeah, well, and again, looking at the contrast of President Trump to Governor Evers, this was his last State of the State speech, but President Trump, as we talked about earlier, he talked about America. He talked about American stories and what God is doing through American Positive Ways, contrasted to what Tony Evers did. It was all about, look at all the great things I did as Tony Evers as governor. And so again, we have different sort of leadership philosophy perspectives of one is for the people where the other one is looking self-centered at himself.
Well, coming up just a month away, April 7th, we have our spring election here in the state of Wisconsin. This is a very critical election. We're not hearing a whole lot about the election out there, and our viewers really need to take note of what's at stake. Only one race is on the statewide ballot.
Yeah, and that race on the statewide ballot, Tuesday, April 7th, is the Wisconsin race for state Supreme Court. And this will be very important for the future of Wisconsin. Right now, Liberals hold a 4 to 3 seat majority in the state Supreme Court. There is an incumbent who is retiring. That's Justice Rebecca Bradley. She is a conservative. So if the Liberals win this seat, they will take a 5 to 2 majority. But if the conservatives win, then it would be still a 4 to 3 Liberal majority.
Okay, here's just a comment. This is from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Lazar faces time crunch in Supreme Court race. Found that to be very interesting. And they found this story also interesting from the Journal-Sentinel. In the Supreme Court race between Taylor and Lazar, undecided leads. Sam, do people know about the candidates?
I don't think so, Jim, at all. And it's honestly, it's different from the last election where there was over $100 million poured into the state. You had Elon Musk flying into the state. You just had so much different chaotic events. Your TV screen was just littered with ads. You couldn't get on social media. You couldn't go anywhere without.
It was battle for control at that time.
It was, and it's almost the exact opposite. It's the battle for silence right now for state Supreme Court. And I will say it's a question maybe of resources for the conservative candidate Lazar, if compared to the liberal candidate Chris Taylor. I think Chris Taylor has millions of dollars in hand. Lazar has less than $1 million in hand, and so I think there's some resource issues there. But I do think you do see this interesting take of both candidates are pretty quiet. There aren't a lot of groups speaking about either candidate. The only ads that I've seen have been for liberal Chris Taylor so far in tearing down Judge Lazar. But even that has been marginal at best.
Yeah. Here's an article that was in Urban Milwaukee, and I'd like you to respond to this, Daniel. It says, far-right anti-abortion group, and they're referring to Wisconsin Family Council in this ad, endorses extremist Maria Lazar.
Well, that's news to myself, Jim. So our organization, Wisconsin Family Council, has never given any political endorsements. Now, we do have a sister organization, Wisconsin Family Action, that does, but what's interesting is this election cycle, the only candidate that Wisconsin Family Action has endorsed is Anthony Lococo for appellate judge, but they haven't made any endorsements for the state Supreme Court race. And what I find really unique about this situation is Maria Lazar has run her campaign saying she's an independent jurist. She doesn't want to appear partisan. She's intentionally not sought an endorsement from Wisconsin Family Action because she doesn't want to appear political. However, on the flip side of the coin, we do see a former Democrat legislator, someone who is very heavily tied to the Democratic Party, who has come out and said, I'm going to advance abortion causes. I'm going to advance very political causes. And so again, we see here where, unfortunately, the Democrat Party of Wisconsin is blatantly lying and attributing something to Wisconsin Family Council that is furthest from the truth.
Very interesting with that. And let me just say this. Here's an article that also came out, and this is a partnership that's happening with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They're teaming up with Planned Parenthood advocates of Wisconsin for voter outreach. And this is, I should say, FFRF Action Fund. So that's their action matter there. But let me get the page turned here. It says the initial focus is the election of Judge Chris Taylor to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So you have freedom from religion. We want nothing to do with God. We don't want God mentioned in the market square at all. Teaming up with Planned Parenthood that advocates the killing of preborn children, and teaming up to make sure their focus is for the election of Judge Chris Taylor. Note from FFRF Action, Wisconsin voters have demonstrated that they expect courts and lawmakers to respect reproductive freedom and uphold the separation of state and church. That was from the fund president, Annie Lori Gaylor. Our partnership with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin has delivered results before. We're investing early because we know sustained voter engagement is how you win Supreme Court races in April and secure legislative majorities in November. Interesting statement.
Yeah, and I'd say that they're not completely wrong, because the state has markedly, in the last several Supreme Court elections in spring, the conservative candidate has lost consistently, and that's primarily because the spring elections are about turnout. They're turnout battles, and so the Madison and Milwaukee machines have almost perfected turning out liberal voters. If you look at the percentage of voters in Dane County that turned out specifically for liberal candidates, the number's astronomically high. You look at other counties who would lean more conservatively, and the turnout numbers are below what a midterm or presidential election would be. And so you don't see that drop off in Madison or in Dane County. And that's really, they are correct that the outreach that they're doing, the drive to get voters to the polls early and often, has been successful in knocking off several conservative justices.
One other article, and this came from the newamerican.com, and the headline caught my attention. Wisconsin Supreme Court race could cement liberal control through 2030. That's, as you have said, Daniel, elections have consequences.
Oh yeah, elections definitely have consequences, and this is why Wisconsin voters have to vote in each and every election, because it really does have an impact, especially at the state level in April elections. But again, going back to your Freedom from Religion article, again, I just encourage people to look at the information, to vote your values, but we see that values are really clear. We have one candidate who said, I'm an impartial justice. I'm not going to do anything that appears political or is political. That's Maria Lazar. And on the other hand, Chris Taylor, who is a former employee, is a former lobbyist for the abortion lobby, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin, but also is now endorsed by them, supported by them, and is partnering with Freedom from Religion. Again, we see there's a campaign that's saying very clearly, I'm going to do whatever it takes to take God out of any sort of government, but also take biblical values and conservative values out of any form of government, and also be a strong advocate for abortion. We've seen this in many of her TV ads as well. Right now in Wisconsin, abortion is legal through the first 5 months of pregnancy. But for liberals like Chris Taylor, they don't believe that's enough. They want to see abortion have a constitutional right through all 9 months of pregnancy.
Yeah, and some states are heading that direction. Some states have approved that direction, and truly a tragedy to see that, friends. Abortion is the taking of innocent human life, and again, that's been very, very much in the forefront on the part of the liberal candidates who've been put on the Supreme Court. They've been openly campaigning for that to take place. Far different from yesteryear, when judges remain impartial in running for office. No longer is that the case here in the state.
And Jim, I would like to just jump in too, specifically on the record, Trisco, as someone who's worked in the Capitol and knows about this. I mean, just for people's awareness, because I think this is something that hasn't been highlighted at all in the media at all, is that Chris Taylor was one of the most progressive and liberal Democrats, and that wasn't a secret. That was a badge that she wore very proudly. Some of the things that she did, she was the lead author or second author on was bills to legalize marijuana, bills to legalize same-sex marriage, bills to ban styrofoam packaging, bills that would allow the DNR to ban hunting and trapping on state land. So to just lay out, this is a pattern of someone who believes in a government that has ultimate control, but only for the things that she believes in, and not protecting the rights of people, which is just to juxtapose Maria Lazar's experience as a attorney, an assistant attorney general, and then as a judge, has consistently shown that she desires to be impartial, and that's up for the voters to decide if she has achieved that. But that is her approach, that traditional model of this is my judicial philosophy, this is what I'm going to promise keeping my opinions out of the courtroom, and we'll see how that compares and contrasts with Chris Taylor, once again, proudly the most liberal member of the Wisconsin legislature for almost a decade.
Wow. Well, friends, you're watching inFocus, our legislative update, and again, we want to remind you that April 7th is our spring election. We will be, Lord willing, we'll have our election eve broadcast here on inFocus, a legislative update with these two gentlemen. But I do want to underscore the importance of getting out and casting your vote. Your vote is a stewardship, that you're accountable before God and really before your fellow man as it relates to who we put into office here in our state. there is a website that the state has put up, myvote.wi.gov, is available for you to look at what is on your ballot. The matter, though, is that in the cases of state elections, they will not activate that information on the website. They won't populate it until 21 days before the election. We're still outside that realm, but I trust you'll take advantage of that. myvote.wi.gov. You'll find many ways that you can click on what's on my ballot. You can click on register and vote. Lots of helpful information on that site. And certainly, where do you vote? And all of those many questions can be answered through this website, myvote.wi.gov. We're going to be looking at some pieces of legislation, things that you've been tracking and following. And one of them is, I've got a bill right here, Assembly Bill 105, regarding the distribution of certain material on the internet. I understand this has passed through the legislative process.
Yeah, this is something that I'm really excited for. This was our number one priority that we had at Wisconsin Family Action this last legislative session, and just really grateful for Sam's leadership and many of the legislators' leadership to be able to get this through the legislature now to the governor. But Sam, you want to share a little bit about some of the highlights of this legislation?
Yeah, and to reiterate, Dana, this was a long journey to get this bill. It was introduced last session.
March 10th, 2025.
Yeah, well, even before that last session,
okay.
too. So 2 years before that was introduced, didn't make it through the process. And so it was introduced this past year in March of 2025, and we've been working with legislature and stakeholders to make sure that we were addressing concerns and trying to have a good piece of legislation that ultimately protects kids from pornography. That is the goal of the bill, and we're proud to say that that bill, if signed by the governor, would do exactly that. We've seen in other states, other countries, traffic to pornography websites has dropped by almost 50% due to laws like this being put into place. So we're asking you as the viewer, and we're asking our audience, the people that we speak to contact the governor, because this bill still has to be signed into law. It's been passed by the Assembly, it's been passed by the Senate, both on bipartisan measures. I might include as well, Jim, that Democrats voted for this bill, many of them. And so this is something that we think has appeal from the left side of the aisle, the right side of the aisle, that we need to protect kids from the dangers of pornography. And like I said, you need to contact the governor, because he needs to hear from people that this is important to you. Because once again, he's gonna have people in his ear who are gonna say, let's not have the pornography companies be accountable for their product. Let's make the parents more accountable. Let's make the kids, they should just have to figure it out on their own. They need to hear from people like you, from parents, from people in the community here in Wisconsin, that this bill is important and that the governor needs to sign this bill.
Friends, you can contact the governor's office at 608-266-1212, 608-266-1212, and get a word to the governor.
And speaking of that too, what Sam mentioned isn't just a hypothetical. We have already seen the pornography industry. They've rebranded themselves as the Free Speech Coalition. They have already gone out and told their supporters, go out and make sure that you oppose this bill. And so if they're already doing it, we need to make sure that Christians make their voice known on it. And so again, we encourage you to reach out to the governor's office and let your voice be known.
And I would encourage folks also to get plugged in on our website, wisconsinfamilycouncil.org, and Wisconsin Family Action as well, because we will have lots of resources there to help people figure out how to reach the governor. So please don't hesitate if you're unsure to call us or email us. We'd be happy to connect you with things that will make it easier for you to make your voice be heard.
Sam, does the governor have a specific time frame in which to sign this, or?
Right, so at the very minimum, all the bills we sent to the governor on April 2nd, but the governor could call for, or the leaders of the legislature could send any number of bills early. So kind of the time frame is between any time between now and April 2nd, we will see this bill head to the governor's desk. So the sooner we can get the governor listening to us on this, the better.
That's another piece of legislation, and this is something that seems like it would be a no-brainer for those who are concerned about the state of the family and so forth. This is Assembly Bill 601, but it is something that would bring about sports wagers, and it deals with defining what the word bet means.
Yeah, well, and what's really unique about this bill, as well as it, in some ways, and some groups have argued that this is even unconstitutional on its face. Right now, for gambling to exist constitutionally in Wisconsin, it's supposed to be done through the tribes, and so this bill is using a loophole at best. I would even argue even possibly unconstitutional. They're arguing and saying that because they are going to have the online servers, the computer servers on tribal land. Therefore, anyone could bet online anywhere in the state. Hypothetically, for our churches, you could have situations where the pastor is concerned about someone in his church struggling with a sports gambling addiction and then being able to even gamble inside the church. But there's so many issues within this bill, and again, grateful for Sam's work.
You know, Sam, I'm going to have you tell us, but there's a poll on this too that I'm going to have you address. Here's from the Center Square poll: Wisconsin voters don't want online sports wagering, and some of the numbers are rather startling.
Right, and so just to talk about that bill a little bit more, to just be explicitly clear, what that bill does is it would allow exclusive rights to the tribes to have online sports wagering. The United States Supreme Court overturned a previous case, throwing it back to the states, similar to the Dobbs decision with abortion. They threw this issue back in the state's lap. And so we've seen a number of states legalize online sports wagering. And that's what this bill is intended to do, is to route it through the tribes, specifically that online sports wagering would become legal, because currently it is illegal in the state of Wisconsin. Yes, the Marquette law did a poll very recently on this, and it turned out that Wisconsinites don't like the idea of online sports wagering, actually. They recognize what we recognize, that it's harmful to society as a whole, it's harmful to family, it's detrimental to people's financial health, emotional and psychological health. 64% of the poll said that they oppose legalizing any form of online sports gambling, which is just a shocking number. I honestly expect it to be a closer margin. But I think people, once again, have realized how harmful this is. There was a Washington Post journalist that recently released a book just in the past month. And he's not a social conservative, he's not a Republican or anything like that, he's a Democrat. Wrote an entire book on how horrible online sports wagering has taken place in other states, and how it has affected both the sports industry and the athletes themselves, really talking about how everybody loses when sports gambling is legalized. And so some big takeaways from that poll that I took away was that every demographic had a majority opposition to the bill, or to that concept of legalizing sports wagering, except for people who live in the city of Milwaukee. And so it's just incredible across the partisan lines. Republicans opposed it, Democrats opposed it, people who were independent opposed it, people who were rich, people who were poor, people who had some education, some people who had a lot of education, every type of socioeconomic background, they opposed this bill.
But what about legislators? Do they oppose it?
Well, that's kind of a sad thing to say, as I'm pretty disappointed in Assembly Republicans, because they passed this bill. They've already moved this forward, and it's now in the state Senate. So it's up to the state Senate to determine whether or not this bill goes to the governor for a signature. I'm hearing right now that there are a lot of state senators who are feeling a lot of pressure from the tribes, from other senators who want this bill. They're getting, people who are currently opposed, getting a lot of pressure to say, hey, you should do this, because we feel like this is a good thing for us. And so the people have loudly spoken that they don't think it's a good idea, and we don't encourage legislating by poll, but I think it's important to see that from our perspective, this is bad policy. This is policy that is harmful to the family. It's quite literally destructive to the society that we live in, and we're seeing it within our own eyes, this constant betting on everything from pitches to now how long the president's speech is going to go in the State of the Union. You can bet on almost anything in certain states. And so we've seen this obsession take over. And I'll say personally, as a sports fan, I'm sad to see what it's done to the sporting world. We've seen games being rigged. We've seen people throwing games because of the money involved. And I think that's just going to set up for a future where, someone, especially in the college realm, we have these kids who are competing often on a scholarship, and they're trying to just do their best. I saw one story where a kid got death threats because he shot too many shots and he scored too many points. And so there was a legitimate, not a like, oh, I don't like you threat. It was a legitimate death threat where he needed security for it. And so the biggest fear, I think, from the sports world, and I saw this from a number of sports commentators, was that the rigging of the games is the least of their concerns. The biggest concern is what happens when someone acts on those threats to one of these young athletes.
Yeah.
And so, once again, I'm very passionate about it. I'm hopeful that the state Senate will listen to people who are contacting them about this, that people would consider, once again, reaching out to your state senator. If you feel very passionate about whether or not sports gambling should be legalized, find your state senator and let them know what your thoughts are.
Friends, there is a hotline that you may call as well. If you don't know who your senator is, call the hotline. They'll give you the senator. They'll give you a direct number to their office. The Wisconsin Legislative Hotline number is 1-800-362-9472. You do have a voice. You can get your word to your senator. And right now it's already passed the Assembly. 1-800-362-9472. And Daniel, if they pass this, the Assembly has passed it, if the Senate has, it goes to the governor. Where does he stand on this issue?
Yeah, and one thing I want to share before I get to that is sometimes Christians will ask us, well, why would we oppose this as Christians? I think what Sam just laid out is a great reason why as Christians, because we want human flourishing to occur. And we know that people follow plans that are outside of God's plan, that ultimately leads to destruction. It leads to sin. It leads to brokenness. And that is the problem we see with sports gambling, is the addictive nature to it. It just makes it very, very hard for families to flourish, as well as for humans to flourish. And so we would argue as Christians, we have a duty and an obligation to support policies that will better families. And one thing that was a concern for me reading this survey is that 1 out of 4 people that self-identify as born-again Christians supported online sports betting through this poll. And so we have more work to do in our churches and everywhere we go to make sure people in our churches do not support online sports betting.
The book of Proverbs warns a lot about these get-rich-quick schemes, so to speak.
Absolutely. And then back to your question about the governor, one of the things that really concerns us is, based off of what we've been hearing, it sounds like the governor would be supportive of this bill. And going back to your statement earlier in the poll numbers, 64% of Wisconsinites oppose this. And I recall seeing somewhere before the governor said something like, the will of the people is the law of the land. And so based off of that logic, he should veto this bill if it gets to his desk.
Well, even if he considers his own view on this, because he just issued this Problem Gambling Awareness Month for the month of March. This is a proclamation that Governor Evers just put out on the 6th day of February, and declaring March 2026 as Problem Gambling Awareness Month. And truly, if this is his sentiment, you would think that he would have great caution in advancing such legislation.
Yeah, you would think, but again, sometimes what's frustrating, I know for Sam and I, is the money that's involved in and the politics behind the scenes. And again, this just goes back to the addictive nature of it. I have a family member, love him dearly, but he did a sports bet legally at a casino in Wisconsin for the Super Bowl. And one of the conversations we had was about this legislation. And when we talk about problem gambling, for him, his story was, Dan, I have to drive an hour to a casino in order to gamble. I occasionally do it. It's not something that's good. But if I had the ability to do this on my phone, where I was following the game and I could do live bets, all those sort of things, he said, I would be scared. I couldn't control myself. He would very easily end up in that problem gambling category. And this is an opportunity where the governor, as well as the state senate, can step up and say, no, we actually believe in helping with problem gambling by not expanding sports betting.
And I would say, Jim, that is inherently in the nature of online sports betting, is that increased addiction risk. So we see in typical casinos, you're going to have a certain segment of people who are addictive. But the problem with the online sports gambling specifically is that it puts that addiction on a hyper scale. I've said in the Capitol that this is like gambling on meth, because you can hit that button over and over and over again. You can track every single game and once again, bet on this pitch and on that pitch. And is that going to be a ball? Is that going to be a strike? Is he going to make this pass? Did he miss it? Is that person going to get 5 rebounds or 10 rebounds? There is no limit on all of these different aspects of it. And it's inherently designed to make people want to do it over and over again and keep on doing the betting over and over again. So it's even more addictive than I think what people kind of see as traditional gambling right now. And the effects of that are seen. I think when we talked about this bill potentially last year, we saw that financially, so there were some studies that were done that for every dollar spent on gambling, there were $2 less that were put into savings for people who were gambling. Not addicted to gambling, it was just gambling in general. Yeah. And so, we see it from, once again, Daniel said, from a perspective of how it harms the family, how it's addictive to society. But there's also a financial aspect of this, which is highlighted in the governor's proclamation, that this is a societal problem, that when you have problem gambling, when you have addiction, and there isn't, when people are spending their money on things like that rather than on their savings, that creates large financial problems. It creates a greater burden on social services, on that gambling addiction resources, and as well as long-term saving. That was one of the biggest impacts, was long-term savings. So if you're not saving for long-term, instead of you're putting it all into gambling, well, where's that money for retirement? And you become more reliant on Social Security because you don't have anything saved up at the end of your life.
Domestic abuse becomes an issue as well.
That's one of the big ones, yes.
Yeah. Friends, you're watching inFocus. We've got many other pieces of our legislative update here tonight, but we also want to open our phone lines. And as we're talking here, if you have a question you would like to ask or a comment on some of the areas of discussion tonight, our telephone number here for inFocus is 1-800-733-8830 or 414-935-3030. 414-935-3030 or 1-800-733-8830. Taking your questions, your brief comments that you may have on these pieces of legislation, and maybe you want to weigh in on this online sports betting. It's already passed the Wisconsin State Assembly. It's going over to the Wisconsin State Senate at this point. And if they pass it, Governor Evers, it appears, may be very anxious to sign this into law. So your voice needs to be heard on this matter. Again, our number 414-935-3030. If you'd like to text in your comment or question, you can use our text line, which is 414-459-9638. That's 414-459-9638. Texting in your comments here this evening. I'd like to talk about a couple of bills that you also have been tracking and just introduced here the end of January. Assembly Bill number 962 and also 963. Both of these are dealing with age verification issues.
Yeah, Jim, and so these are bills that came up late. We think we talked about it last time on the program regarding the Speaker's Task Force of Protecting Kids in the world of new technology. And so each of those bills kind of addresses two different things. One addresses how app stores, specifically, if you think about for Apple or for Google, the Google Play Store, you think about the products that are on there. They are curating specifically those type of apps. They set the rules for that app developers abide by. And so what the first bill does, the 962, is it specifically regulates how app stores interact with children. And so it's really important because at the kids' fingertips now on these devices, you have an entire world that's available. I was at a public hearing recently, opened up my app store, and the first thing that was on there was a app rated T for teen. Then one was rated 18 plus. The next one was a gambling app. The next one was a live video chatting app. Another one was a dating app. All within the first few scrolls of that screen. And so what that bill specifically says is that you have to get parental consent before a child downloads an app or makes a purchase in an app. I think that's really important, once again, to say that you have to get parental consent because there are competing bills out there and the competing ideas out there of maybe just having the government make the decisions for the parent. And once again, from our perspective, is that the parent's rights should be strengthened when we're looking at how laws are implemented. Not that the government is making decisions for families, but that the families are making the best decisions for them and being empowered in that way. And so that's the first bill. The second bill relates to social media specifically and how social media can be both addictive and harmful. And so it uses a different measure to kind of gauge how social media is interacting with minors and saying that if you're trying to get a kid onto a social media, whether that's Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, whatever it may be, you have to get parental consent for that account to be created. And so these are inherently strengthening parental rights, giving parents the ability to choose, not dictating to them how they need to parent, but just saying you as the parent need tools that will be effective in making sure that your kids, what they do and don't access.
And children younger and younger having access to smart devices, the phones, the pads, etc.
Yeah, and it's one of those issues too that I think is really unique because right now conservatives are really struggling. How do we message to women that are in their 30s to 50s that have kids living in suburban communities? And this is one of those very few issues that crosses party lines where we are seeing, and I can't recall the exact study off the top of my head, but some of these polls that have been done in other states and throughout the country have shown almost 80-20 support, especially with parents. This is a pro-parent policy. And again, as Sam mentioned, we want to provide parents the opportunities to make these decisions for their kids and not to be thrown into these addictions they see with social media and all these other apps, especially the dangers of often what's happening in these apps where some of these children are being targeted, they're being groomed by older individuals parents ought to be part of those conversations to make sure they can protect their kids.
Friends, you're watching inFocus. It's our legislative update that we do on a monthly basis to keeping you informed on critical issues that are going on in Madison. A lot of media does not cover these issues. Perhaps this is the most in-depth forum that there is, really dealing with the matters that pertain to life and liberty and the advancement of the family and standing up for life and marriage. And certainly these are critical pieces of legislation that we're talking about. And there's another attack that we're going to tell you about here in just a moment, but our phone line is open tonight, 414-935-3030 or 1-800-733-8830. Our text line also available for you tonight. We'll keep the numbers rotating on the screen. That's your opportunity to give us a call or text in to us here this evening. What's concerning is legislation that is right now being circulated amongst legislators to become co-sponsors that would actually bring about physician-assisted suicide. I've got a copy of that right here. Right now it's LRB, that stands for Legislative Reference Bureau. It doesn't have a bill number as of yet, but pertains to permitting certain qualified individuals to make a request for medication for the purpose of ending their lives and providing a penalty. Gentlemen, I'm going to have you comment on this, but in my opinion, everything we have seen in countries around the world that have passed this, it is a very, very slippery slope. Oh, they start saying, oh, we have all of these safeguards. You have to have so many physicians that will give this information. And before you know it, it gets whittled down less and less and less as far as the qualifications to where things have gone in Canada, where even now people who are requesting it on the same day, the very same day that they are making requests, they're taking their lives through what they call MAID, medical aid in dying.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jim. And I've even heard some stories in some places where they have this medical aid in dying or physician-assisted suicide, where people are even doing it for things like anorexia, things like mental health issues, where now they're going through
and depressed.
Yep, and they are actually having state-sponsored suicide. This is terrible. We should be looking at how do we care for individuals and people. And as Christians, we ultimately believe that God is the one who's the author of life, as well as the one who decides when we die. And so for us, we would definitely oppose this legislation. The one thing that I've always just thought was interesting listening back to Ghislaine Appling's leadership over the years is she said this was actually the first bill she ever testified on back in 1997. And this bill has come back in the legislature each session since 1997. But again, thankfully, this bill will not go anywhere. But going back to those names, there's something that's really important on there. One of the names on the bill is currently running for governor as a state, that's in the state Senate. That's Kelda Roys. And again, this is where understanding about what values are going to be on the ballot this April as well as August and November are super important, where we see candidates making a bold stand saying, if I become governor, these are the sort of issues that I will believe in and champion.
Sam.
Yeah, and I think it's important for the audience to know that this isn't some far-off thing, because I think sometimes we think, well, oh, well, this bill or that bill, does it actually have a chance of coming into law, actually being here in Wisconsin? There's no way Wisconsin, even if the Democrats who are in control, would pass that. And I hate to say it, but this has actually been rising in popularity across the country. You saw a state out east on the East Coast recently legalized assisted suicide. Illinois just passed legislation, the governor signed legislation to allow assisted suicide. And so we're 1.5 steps away from this becoming law in Wisconsin. The other name that to take note on that bill is that the leader of the minority party in the Senate is the prime author, the main author of this bill, Senator Dianne Hasselbein. And so when you say, well, is this actually a priority of the Democrat Party? Is this actually a priority that if they were in charge would actually happen? Yes, this is something that would happen probably very quickly. And so I just wanted to highlight that for people. And once again, the details of the bill are kind of limited to people who have an illness currently. But you look to Canada, as you mentioned, it started out that way. It started out as this, well, only people who are close to dying are going to have that. Well, then it was, well, people who have developmental disabilities, maybe they should, be put to death. Well, maybe if you're sad or depressed, well, then we'll put you to death too. So it's become so expansive in Canada that assisted suicide is a top 10 leading cause of death in Canada. Well, then a top 10, along with cancer and heart disease and things like that, is assisted suicide. And so that slippery slope that we're talking about isn't some far off notion. It literally could happen within a decade of something like that happening in Wisconsin, where it goes from not having it at all to having a leading cause of death.
And especially in countries or states too that have more of a socialistic or even a communistic sort of economic style, what gets really concerning with this is what oftentimes happens is they'll say, oh, this person, we as the state, will say their lives are not as essential as other lives. And so they'll say, well, we need to stop doing medical care for this individual because we need others that need it instead. So this is another reason we should oppose this, as you said, MAD, the medical assisted death, but it truly is MAD to promote it.
It really is. And even in Canada, I mean, they're saying, no, we can't, you will not qualify for this medical treatment, but we will pay for you if you want to go to the medical aid in dying. And friends, that's the slippery slope. It goes on. They're doing this in the Netherlands and Belgium, and it is just horrible what is taking place. And when you put that, amongst the top reasons for death, that's very alarming. There is on another issue here tonight, and friends, again, our phone lines are open. We welcome your phone calls, your questions, your text here this evening. 414-935-3030 is our call-in number. 800-733-8830 is the toll-free number coming in here. You may also text in your question or comment, 414-459-9638. There is an issue that's going on, a controversy, a complaint leveled against Representative Sylvia Ortiz Velez. What's the concern? What's going on?
Yeah, this is probably one of the weirdest stories I think I've ever seen. This last week, the Milwaukee County District Attorney, or an ADA, filed charges for disorderly conduct against Representative Velez Ortiz. And some people would look at this and they'd be like, what happened? Like, this is a major issue. A state representative getting criminal charges referred to them. But this is one of the weirdest cases that I've ever seen. So the argument, the allegation that's being made right now against Sylvia Velez Ortiz is that she threatened to talk to a member of the media about a scandal, about an issue of a Democrat person of power. Imagine if someone were to come to you, Jim, in your role as the media and say, hey, I see that there's an issue with this person. Here's this scandal going on in their life. Well, according to the Milwaukee County DA, if I were to do that, I could be criminally charged. I could end up in jail over that. We have never seen that in America. America should not be a place where you are criminally charged for exposing the truth, and especially when it's not slanderous, it's not libel. And honestly, I think this case is going to be thrown out pretty quickly, but really what I believe Democrats here want to do is she has a primary challenge, and they want to be able to show this as a charge against her. Which, again, the context, I forgot to mention earlier, some people might wonder, well, why would Democrats go after this Democrat legislator? Well, this Democrat legislator is a lot like what we see with Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania. She hasn't always voted with conservative causes, but she did something that was really scandalous when we had a referendum vote to allow the voters, allow you to be able to vote whether or not your church should be closed during a public health emergency. Well, she said churches should have the right on that. And Democrats pressured her. They basically put her in a corner and said, you are not allowed to vote on this issue and other issues. And she even came out in the state legislature a couple weeks ago and shared that was her story. Democrats put her in a corner and told her, no, you need to go home. You cannot vote against us. And it's believed that that conversation of her publicly sharing is now the result of these charges.
My. Where we're going with this, here's a text that came in from Edward in Brookfield saying it's very important to consider that other studies, and he's going now to the online sports gambling issue, that other studies show that over 90% of people that participate in online sports gambling lose money. The betting apps are built with the same social media algorithms that get people to scroll to the next video, but are now geared to get users to make another bet. Also, these gambling apps are being masqueraded like an investing app.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And even going off of that, and this is what scares me for my generation and Sam's generation, is yes, 90% are losing money, but a quarter of men in mine and Sam's generation, they are in credit card debt or some form of debt as a result of gambling. And so we're just going to see continue more and more issues of, instead of investing money into an IRA, into retirement funds, people are going to be paying 20+% interest on credit card debt. And it's even to a point now where we're seeing some credit card companies are raising rates on everyone else because of how much money is being defaulted as a result of the credit card gambling debt.
Well, Sam, let's hit another issue here. Schools, teacher groups sue Wisconsin legislature over K through 12 funding. And then from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, teachers union lawsuit attempts to bankrupt Wisconsin and end school choice for families in need.
Yeah, Jim, this is extremely concerning, I'll be honest. This is a lawsuit essentially filed by several Wisconsin school districts, the Teachers Union, the Wisconsin Public Education Network, essentially alleging that the Wisconsin legislature has failed to adequately fund public schools, and specifically because of the school choice program. And so it's kind of a two-pronged attack. It's trying to do two things. It's trying to eliminate the school choice program, or at least have the courts legislate from the bench saying that the school choice program is unconstitutional, which is fairly silly because the state Supreme Court has multiple times said that the program is constitutional. So they're trying to go against precedent, and they're trying to have the court legislate from the bench on that. And in addition, they're trying to have the court essentially legislate from the bench an infinite amount of money to be spent on public schools. It's a common thing that I usually ask people who are talking about public school funding is, what's your number? How much money should schools be getting? And I can never get an answer because it's never enough is never enough. And so that's actually what this lawsuit does, is it says enough is never enough. And it's crazy because we spend more on public schools now than we did a decade ago. We spend somewhere roughly in the $17 to $18 billion. Almost a third of our entire state budget goes towards public schools or education. And so it's very crazy because you've seen with the population decline also that there's actually more money per student there than there has ever been. And yet our results are at some of the worst or lowest levels than they've ever been. There's this clear correlation, or not a correlation, that more money does not equal fantastic results and more A+. In fact, what we've seen is that in the school choice program, which provides competition for public schools, that they deliver consistently year over year better educational outcomes with less money and less support from the state. And so I think this is something to keep our eye on. This lawsuit was just filed, but this is clearly an overture to do two things: to try to end the school choice program and to infinitely spend more money on public education.
Yeah, and one of the things too I thought was interesting was I saw an infographic that showed the amount of money that's spent, especially by these school districts that are in the lawsuit, per pupil, and how much state aid they get. And so one of the districts on there is spending almost $20,000 per student that they're getting in aid from the government, from taxpayers, and they're complaining that they don't have enough money. Now contrast that with the high schools that are in the voucher program. They get $12,000 per student, and then the K through 8, they get about $8,000 per student. And so again, there is a difference between the public schools at a $20,000 range and $19,500 average range compared to the $8,000 to $12,000 range for private schools. And which of those two outcomes are better for most students? We continue to see time and time again that the choice program is a better outcome for students at a much lower cost.
And many have gone that direction, choosing choice school, seeing that the education that they're getting, for the most part in the public education system, is far inferior than what a choice school would provide, and at far less money, as you point out, Sam. It's just amazing.
And I like to remind viewers too, because the school choice program has been around for a little while now, but this isn't, not anyone can be part of the school choice program. It's means tested, which means only people who make, less than $100,000, generally, like less, even far less than that in some areas. So it's really a program for people who don't have the financial means to send their kids to another program, but are in a failing or unconducive to their kids' learning environment situation. We'd like to see, from our perspective, broader and greater educational freedom, where it's not just limited to that segment of people, but to all people, to say, what you decide is best for your children is what we will support as a state. We've seen that great success in states like Arizona, who have done similar programs like that and have really expanded the opportunities for kids, because it's not this one-size-fits-all box of you have to go here because you live in this zip code, so therefore you are destined to go to this school. Is to say you're going to the best school you can possibly go to that is within your reach. And that's a much better message, both for the families that are there, but also just for the kids to think about, what can I achieve isn't limited within the four corners of this school. It's so much more beyond that. And I really think, to make sure to bring this back to what we were talking about at the beginning of today, was you think about Supreme Court candidates. And so one Supreme Court candidate has not weighed in on school choice or public funding for schools. That's Maria Azar, but one candidate has, and that's Chris Taylor. And Chris Taylor in the past has said that choice schools are wrong for kids, that they are bad for kids. And in fact, she says, and I quote, that the school choice program is wrong. And so that's something for people to be aware of.
So if she's sitting on the court, rendering a decision on a lawsuit just like this.
Yeah, this exact lawsuit, potentially.
Yeah. And she likely would not recuse herself from it.
And speaking of her recusing, there was a really interesting article and news clip I saw. So when she was in the legislature, she introduced a bill that said if someone gives $1,000 or more to a judicial candidate and a case goes in front of them, they should have to recuse themselves. That bill did not pass. So the question was brought to her by a reporter, would you recuse yourself if one of your donors of over $1,000 or more would end up in your courtroom? Oh, well, I'm not in the legislature anymore, so it doesn't matter. And so again, we see this dichotomy of, well, when it benefits myself, when it benefits my political preferences, that they're going to go forward with it.
Friends, we want to bring to your attention also different pieces of legislation have been introduced. These men were with us just 4 weeks ago here on the program, and there have been somewhere close to 300 pieces of legislation, 250 plus pieces of legislation that have been introduced just in the past 30 days. And it's just amazing to see. But some things just really stand out. For instance, I found here Assembly Joint Resolution number 134 and Senate Joint Resolution 129 that would recognize Muslim holidays here for the state of Wisconsin, talking about the holiday of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha to recognize these as holidays for the state of Wisconsin. And I find this so ironic because look at the attack that has come against things like Christmas. We can't even have a Christmas tree in the Capitol under this governor. It has to be a holiday tree. There's attacks upon Christmas and religious ornaments that are on that tree, and yet we are seeing inroads coming up here by certain legislators who want the recognition of Islamic holidays.
Yeah, you know what I think would be interesting, and I'm sure if we were to ask them, they would support this, is freedom from religion. I'm sure would definitely support this. However, they would definitely oppose anything that involves Christianity. And again, this is where when we take our eye off of what actually brings human flourishing, we take our eye off of the truths that Scripture reveals, we unfortunately will end up promoting things like this and other false ideologies.
Yeah, and a couple of weeks from now, we're going to have Usama Dakdak scheduled to be with us on the program here. And one of the things they point out, whereas the majority of Wisconsin's 70,000 Muslims celebrate these two holidays, and he talks about, these numbers, and he talks about once we get a certain percentage within a locale or within a state, that it really changes, the tide turns as far as Islam having what's called the upper house or the upper hand. And that's generally between 5 and 6%. There's more bills that we have, but friends, let's get you a web address and phone number here for our guest tonight, Wisconsin Family Council, wifamilycouncil.org. You'll also find information there regarding their upcoming gala on May the 1st, 1-888-378-7395. And gentlemen, we thank you both for coming tonight and sharing and helping to keep our audience informed.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jim.
Lots going on, Jim. Always happy to be here.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for being here. And Lord willing, back on election eve to join us once again here for the program. And friends, really, I encourage you to put down on your calendar, circle April the 7th, and recognize it's election day here in the state of Wisconsin. So important that you become familiar with the candidates and that you become familiar and that you cast a prayerful vote. God bless you, friends. Thanks for joining us tonight on inFocus. Good night.